All right, guys. So we're gonna get back into Act Three. We're gonna try to finish up Act Three today. And so again, you should have your study guide. We've gone over these questions before. So again, if you didn't get these answers, make sure you pause and review them, paste them into your study guide. This is what we went through with Scene One. Of course, again, Caesar was stabbed to death. You can see the lines there. Again, pause if I'm going too fast. That's the beauty of this. Okay. And one thing that we need to read and understand, that you needed to read and understand at the last meeting to finish Scene One, was that Antony asked to speak at the funeral and Brutus allows it. And this was a very controversial decision. This, again, is kind of where Brutus comes forth and says, you know what, we're going to do things with honor. Remember earlier, Cassius wanted to kill Antony along with Caesar. And Brutus said, no, if we take out the head, meaning Caesar, then the rest of the body is dead. We don't need to kill Antony as well. We're not butchers, Cassius, he says. And so Brutus again shows his honor by allowing Mark Antony to speak. He comes and sees Caesar's dead body, and Cassius doesn't like this idea. Okay, he's not so sure about that. He says, Brutus, a word with you. You know not what you do. Do not consent that Antony speak in his funeral. Know you how much people may be moved by that which he will utter. And of course, that proves to be a fatal mistake of Brutus. Okay, and we'll talk more about that here in a minute. So we just talked about all those notes about what was emphasized in the film. Now we're moving on to Scene Two. And this is the funeral scene of Caesar. Okay, and so we're going to analyze the use of rhetoric. And if you click on this link, this will review ethos, pathos, and logos. This back from the fall when you did your argumentative essay. Ethos, of course, is an appeal to authority and credibility, right? It's believe me for my honor. Believe me because I know what I'm talking about, right? Believe me because I have experience. Believe me because I'm respected. I can be trusted. This is something that Brutus, just talking to the people, he already has a lot of ethos. They believe him for his track record, right? That's why he was so important in Cassius getting Brutus to come along to the conspiracy. Pathos, of course, is all about an appeal to emotions, right? And so this is when it could be an excitement, it could be sympathy and sadness, right? And this is Caesar's funeral, so pay close attention to when the speakers appeal to pathos. And then, of course, logos, the logic, the reason. This is the heart of rhetoric, right? The art of speaking and writing effectively, because you can't just provide statistics. You got to provide the analysis, the explanation that goes along with it, okay? So what I want you to do is if you scroll all the way up, you click on this link, this will take you to My Shakespeare, and we're going to read and follow along here as you take notes of the speeches here. And what you're going to see is Brutus is going to give a speech, and then Antony will be allowed to speak. And really, again, that's not such a good idea. You always want to be the last to speak. If you understand our justice system, usually the defendants, their litigator, their lawyer usually speaks last before the jury decides. And that's a very, it's a big advantage because, of course, the jury is going to remember what they heard last most significantly. Okay, obviously they take notes and things like that. But usually what is spoken last sits in the audience's mind. And so if you're the last one to go, that becomes very important. These are some really interesting videos about the power of the mob and the importance of oratory, and also talking about Rome. Rome had about 1 million people. It was huge. Okay, so we're going to listen to, actually, I'm going to let you listen to scene 2 here of Act 3.
We will be satisfied. Let us be satisfied.
Then follow me and give me audience, friends. Cassius, go you into the other street and part the numbers. Those that will hear me speak, let them stay here. Those that will follow Cassius, go with him, and public reasons shall be rendered of Caesar's death.
I will hear Brutus speak.
I will hear Cassius and compare their reasons, when severally we hear them rendered.
The noble Brutus is ascending.
Okay, so what you should have noticed is Brutus uses lots of logos. You know, one of the key things that he says is not that I love Caesar less, but that I love Rome more. And really, even within that, you could say that that's also pathos. All right, because he's appealing to emotion of love. The people loved Caesar just as he did, and he's saying, "Hey, it's not that I disagree with you. I love Caesar too, but I love you more." And so that's not only pathos, but it's also logos. You know, the logic is, hey, it's not that I didn't like Caesar. I just love you more. It's one or the other, and I choose you. You know, he says, had you rather Caesar were living and die all slaves than Caesar were dead to live all free men, right? So your Brutus's argument is, would you rather be a slave and have Caesar live, or would you rather be free and have Caesar dead? And so he gives them that appeal. He also says, I honor him. That even builds up some ethos, as he was valiant, but as he was ambitious, I slew him. This is why he killed him, because of his ambition. And you can read that there. And so, of course, the crowd wants Brutus to be king. They want him to be Caesar. And then Mark Antony is enabled to speak. And this proves to be a fatal mistake of Brutus's. This is where Brutus's honor is too good to be true, and he was not really as smart as he should have been. Okay. And so here you see some ethos and logos from Mark Antony. He says, hey, he was my friend, faithful and just to me, right? You need to understand, Antony has to appeal to the crowd. He has to connect with them. He has to build up his credibility, his ethos. Right now, the crowd is for Brutus and Cassius. They want to kill anybody associated with Caesar. That's how fickle they are. That's how persuasive Brutus's argument was. So he says, hey, Caesar was my friend, okay, but Brutus says he was ambitious. Brings up, Brutus's arguments, building up his ethos. And he says, hey, Brutus is an honorable man. Again, this is verbal irony. Antony does not necessarily mean that. He hates Brutus, especially with what he did to him. Okay, but he has to connect to the people if the people are going to listen to him. So he says, hey, he hath brought many captives home to Rome, whose ransom did the general coffers fill? Meaning, hey, Caesar brought home lots of loot, lots of money. He extended the Roman Empire. Is Caesar really ambitious from that? He uses a rhetorical question. That's the logos, right? It gets the audience to think. And then he gives another example. He says, when the poor cried, Caesar wept. Ambition should be made of sterner stuff. Again, it's more logos. He's building up his ethos by giving an example. Hey, Caesar cried with the poor. Okay, it's not the best example. He's not, giving a specific circumstance, but he's saying, hey, Caesar cried with you. Ambition should be made of sterner stuff, meaning, all right, are we really killing him out of ambition when he cried with the poor? That's where the logos comes in, the explanation of that fact. And he's saying, hey, yet Brutus says he was ambitious. Brutus is an honorable man. Well, again, that is verbal irony. Antony doesn't believe it, okay? But he has to connect to the audience if they're going to listen to him. And so that's what I explained right here. He has to pivot and slowly switch their attitude. Okay, and one of the most important things that that Antony has is later on here. If you look at the end of the scene, okay, Antony has Caesar's will. Okay, and what's really important about this is that in Caesar's will is that he bequeathed a rich legacy. Okay. He's saying here, Antony's like, oh, you don't want to hear this. It'll stir your souls. It'll make you go mutiny and rage. But here's a parchment with the seal of Caesar. I found it in the closet. 'Tis his will. Now, I don't know whether this is true or not. I couldn't find any actual circumstance of this being the case. Antony may have made it up, right? But it says, basically, as they continue on, because he's building up, he's stirring up the crowd to want to revolt. He's stirring up the suspense. He's like, oh, I don't want to read it to you. Have patience, my gentle friends. I must not read it. It'll hurt you. It'll make you go mad, he says right here, right? And finally, read it, and basically he says in the will, he finally gets to it here. Okay, he talks about there being 75 drachmas for everyone, which I believe ended up being, oh goodness, I want to say it was like $5, $10, $15, $20 maybe. Okay, and he also pledged, of course, his walks. It says his parks. Okay, arbors. So basically, not only that, but he also looks at the dead body of Caesar. Saying this is where Brutus slayed him. This is where Cassius slayed him. So Antony has an amazing amount of ethos just based on Caesar's will, that evidence, and the dead body, pointing to it, building up pathos, saying, hey, this is where these guys killed him. In fact, they didn't just kill him, they sliced and diced and sauteed him. What a terrible way to die, right? And so that builds up pathos and rage in the people. And then he talks about the will that Caesar loved you, and this is what he's given to you, 75 drachmas to every person. So the crowd wants to mutiny. Okay, so we need to remember that at this point, you have Brutus, Cassius, and Casca that are against Caesar. You have Antony who's for Caesar. And then later on, you'll see Octavius and Lepidus, or a couple of other key characters that are for Caesar. They formed the new triumvirate. Okay, and so then we get to scene 3. And I'm going to pause here and have you take a look at scene 3. And a quick way to go about that, you just go up here and you click scene 3. And you can see right here, it's a very short scene. What you need to understand from scene 3 is that it shows the angry, the ignorant mob. Okay? Shakespeare is trying to tell the people, don't act like the mob. Don't be like them, all right? Because there's a guy by the name of Cinna, all right? There was a conspirator by the name of Cinna. Well, this dude is Cinna the poet, and he's being chased. And at the end, he's beaten up or killed, we're not sure. And the plebeian says, it is no matter, his name's Cinna, pluck but his name out of his heart and turn him going. So it shows you how angry they are, okay? So we're going to stop there. And in just a minute, we'll go over the comprehension questions.